A friend of mine has a very strong personality and always appears resilient and decisive in all relationships. But when we talked deeply, he shared that although he looks outwardly unbreakable, inside he is actually very sensitive and easily hurt. He said he is often affected by the words and actions of others, feels wounded, and wants to change but does not know where to start. This causes him great pain. This situation is quite common in life. Introverted people are often labeled as timid and mentally weak. In reality, even those who appear extroverted can be very vulnerable and sensitive inside. Everyone, to some degree, harbors deep-seated feelings of inferiority. So how can one cultivate a strong soul? Ancient Wisdom Lesson warmly greets you all. Listening to one valuable book every day will help you develop a life of wisdom and elevate your thinking to a new level. Today, we will decode the bestseller Anti-Fragile, The Ability to Thrive in Adversity by author Nassim Nicholas Taleb. We will divide our analysis of this book into 4 parts. Part 1. The Ability to Thrive in Adversity, Manifestations of a Strong Inner Self and a Weak Mind. Part 2. Why some people are as sensitive and fragile as glass. Part 3. How to become a person with the ability to thrive in adversity and a strong inner self. Part 4. How to use a strong inner self to cope with unexpected events like black swans. There is a famous saying, "What does not kill me makes me stronger." Through this book, we will examine how to stop being weak and how to use anti-fragile thinking to gain a strong soul. The ability to thrive in adversity and a weak mind. Psychologists believe that a weak mind is often affected by fluctuations or changes from the external environment. But in this world, the only thing that never changes is change itself. Whether we like it or not, the world is always changing. When faced with change, there are 3 corresponding reactions, representing 3 different types of people. The first type fears volatility and uncertainty. They prefer a quiet, stable environment and believe that volatility will bring harm. The second type neither fears nor welcomes uncertainty. They think that volatility does not affect their life. The third type welcomes volatility and uncertainty. They believe that volatility will help them improve. Among these 3 types, which one has the strongest inner self? Clearly, the third type has the strongest inner self, while the first type has the weakest soul, which we call a glass soul. But what the first type fears is actually the true state of this world. The world is always full of volatility and uncertainty. The things they like, such as stability, are merely illusions, like the moon's reflection in water or flowers seen in a mirror. Compared to the first type, the second type has greater endurance because volatility does not change their life. The third type possesses a strong soul, the ability to thrive in adversity, because ultimately they can benefit from volatility and uncertainty. Different reactions to trauma. Let us use trauma as an example to see the difference between these 3 types of people, because trauma is an extreme manifestation of volatility and uncertainty. Psychologists often say that after experiencing trauma, 2 outcomes are possible. Number 1, a person may develop post-traumatic stress disorder, a psychological condition following severe trauma. Specific symptoms can include anxiety, irritability, hypervigilance, depression, and in severe cases, self-harm. Number 2, the person may recover to their normal state before the trauma, no longer affected by it. However, beyond these 2 outcomes, there is a third result, post-traumatic growth. This concept was first introduced by 2 psychologists in the mid-1990s. They realized that trauma can lead to growth in 5 areas: finding personal strength, appreciating life more, forming more stable relationships, finding more meaning in life, and discovering new capabilities. Those who experience this post-traumatic growth are precisely the third type of people who can find development from volatility and uncertainty, and thus possess the strongest inner self. Why do you have a fragile and sensitive soul? To understand how to cultivate a strong inner self and the ability to overcome adversity, we need to explore the causes of a weak mind. The first type of person is very afraid of making mistakes. There is a saying, "The more you do, the more mistakes you make." People who fear making mistakes, who fear failure, often say, "I won't speak anymore to avoid being opposed," or "I won't do anything more to avoid making errors." The level of intelligence will lead to mistakes, failures, and even more serious disasters than before, because avoidance does not mean the problem does not exist. Not making mistakes also does not mean you are perfect. The things you do not know will still be things you do not know. The second type does not want to accept change. Let us take an example from our careers. We may face many different changes, such as a company being acquired, a product being sold off, or a boss being replaced. If we cannot accept these changes, cannot adapt to a new work environment or a new boss's style, our inner self will suffer greatly, and the only option left may be to resign. But at the same time, there are people who, no matter how the company environment changes or how the boss changes, remain steadfast. They may even get promoted and receive a raise. Therefore, knowing that change is inevitable, what we need to do is think about how to continue developing ourselves from those changes instead of always choosing to avoid them. If we give up simply because we cannot endure change, we lack the ability to possess a strong inner self, the ability to overcome adversity. The third type tries to eliminate volatility. There is a type of person even more unreasonable than those who do not accept change, those who try to completely eliminate volatility. If you look back at the 2007 financial crisis, you will realize one of its main causes was the policies of the chairman of the U.S. Federal Reserve, Alan Greenspan. He tried to eliminate the economic cycle between prosperity and recession. His prolonged monetary stimulus policies aimed to control this volatility. In theory, economic volatility is a natural attribute, but Greenspan implemented many artificial interventions to try to eliminate the economic cycle. As a result, risks that were normally exposed by the economic cycle seemed to disappear entirely. The overall economic situation appeared very good, but in reality, it was completely the opposite. All these seemingly vanished risks had actually just shifted from being apparent to being hidden, accumulating beneath the surface and finally erupting, leading to the 2007 economic crisis. Artificially controlling volatility not only made the system extremely fragile, but also prevented the system from transmitting information to us, because volatility itself is information. Volatility always conveys many different types of information to people. Therefore, ignoring volatility and creating a false appearance of stability is very dangerous. This situation is also common in daily life. Everyone encounters various kinds of troubles and sufferings in life. But many parents are overly protective of their children, wanting to remove all these troubles and difficulties for them, hoping their children will have a peaceful and smooth life. Unexpectedly, this good intention causes harm. They are trying to eliminate the natural volatility in their children's lives. If a person has become accustomed to stability over many years, they easily lose vigilance. When a catastrophic disaster suddenly strikes, the loss it causes will be much greater than the loss from normal volatility. In fact, the longer the latent period before a disaster erupts, the greater the damage it causes. Therefore, allowing children to experience small bumps and the natural volatility inherent in life not only helps them learn from suffering and continue to grow, but also helps minimize the risk of encountering larger, more terrifying risks in the future. As parents, letting children frequently endure small changes and volatility will help them avoid serious harm caused by large changes and volatility. So how can one possess a strong inner self and the ability to overcome adversity? First, we need to avoid thinking like an inanimate object and instead constantly evolve like a living organism. If you observe the world around you carefully, you will notice that all living things have a certain degree of ability to overcome adversity, while inanimate objects often deteriorate or break under pressure. First, consider the exceptions, like a glass cup that breaks immediately when dropped. This shows that inanimate objects are often very fragile and lack resilience. In contrast, living organisms are the opposite. They have the ability to resist fragility because their bodies can always develop and evolve naturally. The human body is an example of the ability to overcome adversity, and so is nature. The characteristic of living organisms is their ability to continuously develop and evolve. Therefore, people who do not accept change, who do not want to develop, have a sensitive and fragile inner self. Essentially, they do not see themselves as truly living organisms, but expect and prefer a stable life without volatility. But to have a strong inner self, the ability to overcome adversity, you need to evolve like a truly living organism, not just physically, but also intellectually. The way to evolve intellectually is to replace a fixed mindset with a growth mindset. A fixed mindset believes that each person is born with a certain amount of ability that cannot be changed. In contrast, a person with a growth mindset believes that through persistent practice and effort, everyone has unlimited potential to learn and develop. People with a fixed mindset often avoid change and failure, thereby depriving themselves of opportunities to experience and learn. They often say, "I am not good at sports," or "I have no talent for math." But if you truly have a growth mindset, every time you encounter failure or chaos, you will see it as an opportunity to learn and evolve, helping you become stronger and stronger. That is a strong inner self, the ability to overcome adversity. Second, have sufficient asymmetric pressure. Let us observe the people around us. After graduating from university, some people choose to work in their parents' organizations, in the government system, or in universities. Others choose to work in companies or even start their own businesses. Here, we are not discussing which choice is right or wrong, as this relates to each person's values and life goals. We are only discussing who has a better ability to overcome adversity, and clearly, it is the second group. The ability to overcome adversity is developed from pressure, and the frequency of pressure is also very important. People often perform better under acute pressure than under chronic pressure. People in the second group often face more acute pressure because they must follow the harsh survival mechanism of the real world. In sports, when you start playing tennis, your arm will ache, or when you start running, your legs will hurt. This is because your arms and legs have suffered minor damage, and your body will mobilize all its energy to compensate for this damage. As a result, you find your right arm becomes stronger than your left. This is the process of overcompensation. To develop a strong inner self and train the ability to resist fragility, you need to allow yourself to make mistakes, even proactively make mistakes. If you always choose to do things only when you are sure of success, you may become increasingly fragile. Consider the case of Michael Jordan. Before becoming the king of basketball, he made many mistakes and experienced many failures. Jordan once said, "I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. On 26 occasions, I've been entrusted to take the game-winning shot and missed." Mistakes are a form of volatility, and this volatility brings us extremely important information. From this information, we can learn new things and gain a different perspective on ourselves, thereby becoming stronger. Thus, the ability to overcome adversity and a strong inner self will continue to be enhanced. If you are an entrepreneur, the principle is the same. You need to build within your company an organizational system that can accept failure and does not view failure as something shameful. For example, at Facebook, they encourage all employees to follow 3 principles: move fast, break things, and put people first. The first 2 principles allow employees to fail and create conditions for them to take risks, while the third principle is the core of this social network. These 3 principles together form Facebook's philosophy and are the driving force behind its development from a student dorm room project into one of the world's most innovative and powerful companies. The second method, leave your comfort zone, enter the learning zone and the zone of positive anxiety to create volatility. The development process of each person is the gradual expansion of their comfort zone. When we were a fetus, our mother's womb was our comfort zone. When we were a newborn, our mother's arms were the comfort zone. As we grew older, our home became our comfort zone. With maturity, this comfort zone expands more and more. If you hide in your comfort zone your entire life, from a psychoanalytic perspective, it means you may only want to remain a child forever. In the comfort zone, everything is under control because every day you only do familiar things, interact with familiar people, and you may even be an expert in your field. But this environment lacks change and randomness, which is completely contrary to the necessary conditions for developing the ability to resist fragility. Therefore, if you want to develop a strong inner self, you need to step out of your comfort zone and enter the learning zone, or even the zone of positive anxiety, to create volatility and change. Research shows that in a system, if many small fluctuations occur, the system is less likely to experience extreme volatility. Similarly, if in life you frequently face small fluctuations, you are less likely to face sudden extreme events. Volatility can come from the mistakes you make, or from daring to leave your comfort zone to enter the learning zone and the zone of anxiety, where change frequently occurs. How to use a strong inner self to cope with black swan events. For unpredictable events, also called black swan events, how can a strong inner self and the ability to overcome adversity help us cope? There are two main methods. The first method, create beneficial asymmetry. Beneficial asymmetry means that when an event occurs, the benefit it brings to you is much greater than the loss. This is the core theory behind the barbell strategy proposed by scholar Nassim Taleb. You can apply this logic to personal financial management. For example, dedicate a small portion of your money, about 10%, to invest in financial products that can yield large profits. In the event of a black swan, if the black swan event does not occur, you only lose 10%. But if it does occur, your profit will far exceed this amount. The second method, avoid unacceptable risks. For ordinary volatility, you should welcome it and even actively create it to train your strong inner self. However, for extreme risks, you must avoid them. For example, do not put all your savings into the stock market because you do not know when a large fluctuation will occur. If it happens, the consequences will be unacceptable. When you constantly seek stability, what you receive is only superficial stability. The recent pandemic has proven this statement. But when you start accepting the volatility and uncertainty of life, you will have the ability to grasp true stability and control the situation. One of life's great wisdoms is that without volatility, there is no stability. Finally, only those who have experienced trials are truly strong. Thank you for watching. The summary and interpretation of the book Anti-Fragile, The Ability to Thrive in Adversity for this episode ends here. If you have personal opinions on the content, please leave a comment below. If you feel my content is valuable, please share it with your friends and family. Goodbye and see you next time.